Welcome back to the Blister and Muck podcast. I'm Jenny Mason, your host and the creator of the Blister and Muck series. This episode is so full of cheating and fleecing, it could ultimately lead to the alpacalypse. You've heard the expressions, having the wool pulled over your eyes, or getting hoodwinked. These sayings are strangely related. Long ago, when criminals were sentenced to death, they could then be executed through all sorts of grim means. They could be hung, shot, tied to a spiky wheel, and rolled through a village. Whatever the means of execution, convicts were sometimes given a cloth sack or wool hood to put over their heads. This way, they wouldn't have to see their own death approaching. The awful truth could be mercifully veiled. Nowadays, you don't have to be a criminal to have the wool pulled over your eyes. When we left off, Blister was certain that Dr. Van Sangfreud had missed his own secret meeting. Poor Blister has underestimated the doctor's knack for treachery. Swindle, bilk, dupe, rook, scam, fleece. These are not just synonyms for tricking and cheating. These are the doctor's arena of expertise. By simply entering the abandoned factory, Blister has placed himself inside a trap so much larger and more dangerous than any electrified impressive imprisoner or incredible incarcerator. There's no escaping this epic fleecing, not even through sheer force. I guess that's the end of this podcast. Thanks for listening. It was fun. Wool it lasted. Special thanks to Roland Rudzitis for composing the Blister and Muck theme song. Additional music from... Hello, producers. Cue the closing credit music. We can't air this episode. It's inappropriate for our young listeners. It's going to be a brutal Llamageddon. And these alpaca puns are sure to spur some angry emails from parents. Okay, so now that's settled. Ahem. Special thanks to Roland Rudes. I can't believe you're forcing our listeners to witness Blister's demise at the hands of Dr. Van Sangfreud. How can you be so que-sera-sera? It's not like whatever will be. Time will tell. This moment was an avoidable problem, an unnecessary dilemma. Episode 4. The LaboRATory. When Jana descended from the dais, Blister realized the conference was at an end, without any surprise interferences from the goat-bearded man with the cat-head cane. At first, this confounded him, but swiftly he concluded that Mrs. Chettingley and the villain mastermind were waiting to strike when the faithful ORBSs reconvened at 8 o'clock. They wanted Jana to believe her plans were unfolding without a hitch. Exuberant clusters formed around Jana as she made her way to the exit. When her path swerved near the loom where Blister hid, he scuttled up the furry, feathery dress and tucked himself inside the plumage poofs adorning her bustle. "Excellent work tonight, Mrs. Chettingley," Jana said as she shook hands with the chip-toothed lady. Peering through the feathers, Blister saw Mrs. Chettingley smiling like a weasel that just discovered a nest full of eggs.
"Count on me, Lady Van Sangfreud. Yes, yes."
"Count on her to betray you," Blister quietly groused. A line had formed at the exit. Rather than leave en masse, the women had to sneak out as clandestinely as they arrived. Jana's approach parted the line. Women stepped aside with the kind of curtsies usually reserved for royalty. The door swung open to a wall of hard, cold air. The sunset washed the city with strained tomato juice. As Jana and Mrs. Chettingley left the factory, Blister looked for muck or pus, horchata or seltzer. He intended to signal for one of them to follow him, but none of them were anywhere to be seen. The old crate outside the condemned doors stood empty. Wexler Q. Drummel limped out of the shadows. Thump skirk, thump skirk. Before Blister could shout a warning, Jana greeted the former circus performer with aristocratic poise. "Mr. Drummel, how do you do this fine evening?" Mrs. Chettingley scowled.
What do you want?
I think I know where the panther is, Lady Jana.
He gruffed and crinkled open a city map with a cluster of red circles scrawled around the bend in the brackish channel.
Based on the sightings reported in
Leave it
papers.
to the orbs, Mr. Drummel. Yes, yes.
Mrs. Chettingley cut in.
If it's a job worth doing, never send a man. That's what I always say. Yes, yes. Don't you agree, m'lady?
Do what you will, Wexler. I don't care who catches the panther where, Jana said, so long as he winds up in my possession. She crossed the street to where her landau carriage waited. The driver opened her door, and as she climbed in, she informed him their next destination was Tenebrous Hill. Reins snapped. Hooves clopped. The carriage lurched forward. Blister did not spring out of the feathery bustle nest until he was sure they were well away from the factory.
"Jana, you're in terrible danger,"
he shouted. Naturally, the unexpected sight of a rat bursting from her dress startled Jana. Her squeal caused the driver to stop the carriage.
Everything all right, ma'am?
He called from his bench.
"Perfectly, thank you. I didn't realize how late it was."
The driver clapped the reins, and the horse resumed its clop-thop, clop-thop.
"Blister, what are you doing here? Where have you been?" "Where have I been? Ticks and maggots. I haven't been able to find you for weeks."
Neither had to whisper. The pounding horse hooves and the rattling of the carriage was enough to mask their conversation from eavesdropping.
"I'll tell you what I know,"
Blister said. While the carriage rumbled through Blackrust, he told Jana about the imposter pretending to be her dearly departed dad. He told her about the incredible incarcerator traps and the impressive imprisoners. He informed her that the imposter, Dr. Van Sangfreud, had copied her device for extracting hopes and dreams and was using it to addle animals from across the city. He made sure to point out that Mrs. Chiptooth Chettingley and Wexler were spies and saboteurs. He also let her know that finding the panther was also at the top of the imposter doctor's list. He advised her to call off the search so that none of the women could be corrupted or harmed should they encounter the phony Van Sangfreud. He was very aware that he did not share with her the fact that Rip was, at that very moment, residing in the old cathedral's bell tower.
Secrets are weapons that cut in both directions.
He recalled Seltzer's warning about sharing too much information. Although Blister was not a pigeon, he considered himself a secret agent of sorts, and therefore bound to the secret agent's code. Better to keep some information restricted in order to keep Jana from meeting any unnecessary danger.
My, you have been busy."
Jana grinned. Then her face went rigid with thoughtfulness.
Do you mean to tell me that the old fellow at my house is just pretending to be doddering? Yes, maybe. I think so.
Her complexion paled.
You mean you've seen him act otherwise?
Well, not at your house, but at other places, like at the train station and the circus. I saw him run like an Olympian from a herd of elephants.
Jana's eyes marbled wide.
But you called him an imposter. You mean to say he's not my father? Not the real Dr. Jan van Sangfreud? Of course he can't be.
Blister's exasperation escaped. How could Jana not know the difference between her deceased relative and some loony old man?
Orville Whitmore told me your father, the real Dr. van Sangfreud, passed away.
Orville. Jana reclined in her seat, eyes glassy.
I think he's still in love with you,
Blister said.
Is he?
She sighed. After a moment, she vultured a smile.
Is he indeed?
She sat forward, eyes bright, mental gears churning. One of the carriage wheels dipped into a pothole. At the same time, or perhaps just before the bump, Blister's stomach lurched low.
Can you tell the driver to swing by the cathedral?
He asked. Jana shook her head.
I have too many questions for you still. And if what you say is true, then we must extract one solid dream or hope from that little head of yours. We have to get our evidence before that imposter van Sangfreud addles more animals. The more he stupefies creatures, the more superior humanity will seem. We have no time to lose.
Okay, but you need to call off the search for the panther. If Mrs. Chettingley or Vexler finds him, they'll double-cross you. And
Blister caught the panther's name before fully saying it.
They'll hand him over to Dr. van Sangfreud to be addled.
Maybe,
Jana considered.
But if I suddenly call off the search, they're likely to suspect that I know something I oughtn't. Then they're equally likely to tip off the old doc. Therefore, I say we proceed as if we know nothing. We won't let our actions reveal us. We'll let their actions reveal their treachery.
Oh, very clever,
Blister said.
But we can't go to your castle. That's where the bad guy is. Tell the driver to head for the townhouse.
But I am expected at the castle. If we don't go, he'll know something is amiss. He'll suspect my suspicion. Again, I insist we proceed as if we know nothing. If this wicked phony is addling animals to make them seem stupid, then we must extract proof of intelligence from you, Blister. And we must do that tonight.
Okay.
The word came out as slow and reticent as half-dried honey, because Blister believed the fake Dr. van Sangfreud would likely interrupt any efforts to thwart his schemes. The cab stopped at the ramshackle castle. The sun was down, leaving the sky to fill with dusky blueberry cordial. Without any lights on inside, the dark windows leered like black eyes on a battered face. Blister welcomed the sight. Lights off meant nobody home. The imposter doctor was not there. The horse grunted and stomped while Jana instructed the driver to return to the townhouse. Blister thought he glimpsed a pigeon with toffee brown splotches flutter from the top of the cab to the dark scribbles of forest. From the pigeon's feet hung a butter-blonde rat. Blister nearly cheered aloud. Horchata and Muck had followed him to the decrepit castle. Somehow, without cluing Jana in, he needed to tell Muck to move Rip from the bell tower to Putreska's caverns. It was the only place in the whole world where the officers of the Rebalanced Society would not find him. The carriage rumbled away. Jana ascended the steps and plugged the key into the lock on the front door. Blister sucked in a deep breath and exclaimed,
Oh, Rip! Your dress has a rip in it. A rip, I say.
Where?
Jana coiled at the waist to inspect the backside of her dress.
Once you find it, you should definitely hide it. Hide the rip, I say.
I don't see anything.
Jana stretched out her skirt. Speaking more hushed, Blister said,
Must have been a shadow. My mistake.
Jana led the way inside. As the front door thudded shut behind Blister, he hoped Muck heard and understood the secret message. He doubly hoped that, with Horchata's help, Rip could be hidden in time. Jana shed her coat, hat, gloves, and purse in the usual way, sloppily dropping them on the floor. She switched on electric lamps as she passed them. The light chased the shadows into the corners. Blister struck off for the library, but Jana called from a different corridor with peeling wallpaper scabs.
This way,
she said, indicating a dark staircase cutting into the bowels of the house. She whispered,
We probably shouldn't extract any of your hopes and dreams in the library, where the fraudulent doctor might see. I keep a second serum extractor downstairs.
Good thinking,
Blister said.
Always have a backup,
Jana said. At the push of a button, dangling light bulbs blazed over the stairwell. Its path turned at a landing, concealing where it terminated. Blister hesitated.
Spooky,
Jana grinned. She tapped the button, flicking the lights off and on.
Come on, scaredy rat.
She left the lights on and clumped down the groaning stairs. They wound down to a thick wooden door, punctured with a tiny glass window. Light from the adjoining room glowed through the glass. Jana removed a key from a pocket in her furry, feathery waistcoat. She twisted it into the lock and opened the door part way. A steady, mechanized hum issued from the room.
After you,
she bowed. Her airy, jaunty mood was infectious. Blister ambled past the hem of her dress. He imagined the inevitable defeat of the barmy old fellow, locked up in jail for the remainder of his days. He fantasized about his homecoming to the bell tower. With this whole ordeal over, he, Muck, and Spindle could resume their old routine. Maybe Horchata and Seltzer could visit now and then, and play a round of wingding. The thought of life returning to normal spilled a warm, simmering soup sensation through Blister's belly. The soup chilled and clotted when he glimpsed the room. What had once been a stately ballroom was now a laboratory. The floor-to-ceiling windows had been bricked over. The formerly waxed and glistening dance floor was now scuffed and dull. Its nut brown, bread white, cherry pink woodboards were more scratched than a skin rash. Instead of elegant dancers, the room stocked long wooden tables, books on shelves, brass microscopes, gleaming glass beakers and vials, and dozens of peculiar metal instruments, gauges, and scales. Whereas clutter and disarray ruled the residence upstairs, The laboratory was pristine. Order prevailed. Cubed traps, variously sized and magnetized by batteries, lined one wall. Some empty, others occupied by a small variety of animals, including rabbits, a goat, several dogs, a falcon, 2 seagulls, an aardvark, an owl, 3 raccoons, a cormorant, 1 heron, and a few aquariums housing colorful fish, crabs, turtles, an octopus, salamanders, and snails. In one enormous cage hulked a rhino. An electric generator hummed in one corner. It fed electric volts to the contraption lumped at the center of the room. This machine appeared to be the larger sibling of the contraption in the library, complete with blinking lights and spider-eyed dials. The mega contraption sucked additional energy from an outlet in the wall, pulling more power from Blackrust's electric power plant. The generator also fed a spinning tower not far from the contraption. This tower, or centrifuge, consisted of a vertical axle onto which wheels had been stacked. As the axle spun, the wheels spun with it, creating a column of little merry-go-rounds. Countless vials full of liquid sunlight were holstered to the wheel rims. As the shining vials whirled, Blister saw them as tiny stars on rapid orbits. A spinning star tree. About a dozen women in uniform dresses and white aprons labored in the room. Some boiled foamy, fluorescent liquids inside glass beakers. Others consulted books or examined specimens under microscopes. Their work halted when Blister and Jana strode inside. While we had the luxury of gazing around and assimilating many details, Blister had less than a moment to blink at the scene before a glob of cats pounced him. Having been alerted by the flickering Morse code of light from the stairwell, the cats were ready and waiting for this query. Yipes! Will Dr. Van Sangfreud's cats turn Blister into dog food? Cat food? Mincemeat? Whatever. The point is, I tried to warn you. This episode had an unpleasant ending. I suppose the one silver lining is that, thanks to the doctor's swindling nature, we all know how he spent his Halloween. Trick or cheating. Tune in next time to find out whether Dr. Van Sangfreud prefers the bachata, the merengue, the two-step, or the Lindy Hop. Why do we care about his dance preferences? Because he's sure to be dancing on Blister's grave. Come to think of it, I'm pretty sure his dance of choice will be the hustle. In the meantime, visit blisterandmuck.com and use the contact form to tell me what you think will happen next. Know any alpaca or llama jokes better or worse than this one? What did the llama see when he looked in the mirror? His own spitting image. Subscribe to the show at blisterandmuck.com and you'll receive an email alert as soon as the newest episode releases. While you're at the website, you can lend your support to the show by making a donation or selecting an awesome t-shirt, hat, or sweatshirt from the Blister and Muck gift shop. A portion of your purchase helps cover the costs of sound effects, web hosting, music, and more. And enclosed in your gift bag is a special surprise from the entire Blister and Muck crew. Generous listeners are the reason why this show never pauses to share a commercial for new mattresses or protein powders made from ground-up grasshoppers. Another terrific way to support the show is to give it some stars or a positive review on whatever app or platform you use to listen along. Reviews and likes help other listeners discover the show and join in the fun. Speaking of discoveries, I recently discovered Colorado Parent Magazine gave Blister and Muck its tip-top recommendation for kiddos. They praised the show's quick dialogue, smart narration, and wide vocabulary. Huge thanks to Colorado Parent Magazine for the sparkling review. Special thanks to Roland Rudzitis for serving up the Blister and Muck theme song. Additional music from Komiku, John Bartman, Kevin MacLeod, and Mon Plaisir. Orlab and E.B. Crosby brought the fighting cats. Mick Fire made the machinery hum. Al B. Deavy flicked the light switch. Horse and carriage sounds from Sound Ensemble, Sake, and Good Listener. All other sounds from the public domain. Special thanks also goes out to my family, friends, and fans. One for one, and all for you.